Okay, let's jump right into the massive industry pain point that is completely dominating entertainment news right now. The big question, is 10 years just way too soon for a live-action remake? We are looking at a drastically shrinking window in Disney's release strategy, and honestly, the early data we're seeing is incredibly revealing. So in this explainer, we are going to objectively unpack all of it. The polarized reception, the actual production data, and the parent guides surrounding the brand new live-action Moana. We're cutting straight through the online noise to look strictly at what the numbers, the top-tier critics, and the industry analysts are actually saying about this monumental 2026 release.
To keep things moving, we're going to structure our analysis around 6 key areas: the 10-year remake window, the critical consensus, the core performances, the clash between real and artificial sets, the live-action peril factor for families, and finally what all this means for the future of Disney remakes. Starting right off with Section 1, the 10-year remake window. The timing of this release is really the primary engine driving all this intense critical discourse right now.
Just think about this timeline for a second, because it perfectly illustrates what analysts are calling severe remake fatigue. Look at the progression here. You've got the original animated masterpiece dropping in 2016. The animated sequel just hit in late 2024, and then boom, less than 2 years later, a full live-action remake. Industry reviewers are pointing out that the original film hasn't even left the mass consciousness yet. I mean, you can literally still book a Disney cruise based entirely on the 2016 imagery. So Disney is practically forcing audiences to compare this new film directly to its predecessor, literally frame by frame. Moving on to point 2, the critical consensus. Let's dig into how that super rapid timeline directly impacted the reviews. 36%. Standing at a pretty stark 36% on the Rotten Tomatoes thermometer, the hard data establishes an undeniably rocky consensus. Based on a really wide sample of top critics, this metric clearly indicates the film is struggling to justify its own existence to the press. But to really understand the why behind this number, we need to break down the highly polarized arguments from both sides of the aisle. On one hand, you definitely have explicit praise from major industry authorities. The Hollywood Reporter, for instance, argues that despite all the online indignation over the quick turnaround, the film actually works. They point directly to the vibrant colors, Liz McGregor's totally exquisite costume detailing, and the alluring tropical settings. For these critics, the sheer visual spectacle and the sincere retelling are absolutely enough to make it a worthwhile family outing. But then you have Deadline. And they represent the heavy criticism on the other side. They completely slam the visual approach as lifeless and way too dependent on digital effects, explicitly calling it uncanny valley cosplay. Critics in this camp argue the film just lacks the propulsive energy of the original. They're basically viewing it as a cynical, financially motivated facsimile rather than a necessary artistic adaptation. That brings us to point 3, a tale of two leads. This critical divide becomes even more fascinating when we zero in on the core performances. There is a massive, and I mean massive, divergence in how the leads were received. Newcomer Catherine Laga'aia, she is almost universally praised. Reviewers are noting that she injects this genuine charm and really strong vocal skills, standing totally confidently on her own. But conversely, Dwayne Johnson's return as Maui has been surprisingly criticized. Reviewers actually described his performance as oddly catatonic, noting that the biggest movie star in the world somehow struggled to recapture the exuberant magic he brought to a voice booth back in 2016. Now, while the acting definitely faced mixed reviews, the music remains a steadfast highlight. However, a major piece of news emerged from music analysts recently. Composer Lin-Manuel Miranda has indicated that his new track for this film, Along the Way, will officially be his final song for the franchise. It's kind of the end of an era, sparking some really intense discussions about who's going to steer the property's musical identity moving forward. Let's move to point 4, real and artificial sets. For a movie set entirely on the open water, the production logistics here are just a fascinating case study. So, production utilized this highly debated hybrid approach. They secured gorgeous practical locations at Pokai Bay in Oahu, which provided these incredibly authentic golden beaches and real volcanic ridges. But to handle the complex open water voyaging, they had to lean heavily on massive sound stages at Trilla Studios in Georgia. This meant heavy visual effects, incredibly isolating green screens, and completely digital oceans were required to bring the high seas adventure to life. And honestly, this blending of real Hawaiian beaches with artificial studio oceans is the exact core of the audience pushback. This quote from an r/movies user pretty much hits the nail on the head. If the ocean, the enemies, and the animals are all CGI, how much of this is actually a live-action film? Critics have called the result frustratingly claustrophobic, questioning the very artistic merit of remaking a water-based animated film on an indoor soundstage.
Which brings us to point 5, the live-action peril factor. Why does all this technical data actually matter for the average viewer? Let's rely on the ScreenWise app to break down the real, practical implications for families. The ScreenWise Parent Guide breaks the audience down by age with some really actionable data. For ages 3 to 5, they strongly advise caution because the massive theater screen combined with those hyper-realistic textures can easily overwhelm toddlers. Now, ages 6 to 9, that's the sweet spot. They can separate movie magic from reality and just enjoy the pure scale of it. Meanwhile, viewers 10 and up are highly likely to just spend their entire time comparing the technical craft directly to the 2016 original.
The big takeaway here is how the medium completely changes the message, translating stylized, animated villains like the lava monster Te Ka or the giant crab Tamatoa into highly detailed, realistic CGI inherently ramps up the fear factor. ScreenWise aptly notes that this aesthetic shift turns standard Disney peril into a National Geographic nightmare. The tone drastically changes, and that's a major factor parents are considering before buying tickets. Finally, Section 6, Future Disney Remix. Let's pull back a bit and see how this specific film's reception feeds into a much larger industry strategy conversation. Top industry analysts are viewing Moana as a massive litmus test for Disney. Slash Film actually referred to the film as automated corporate entertainment. The really intense criticism regarding the film's artificial feel and that rapid turnaround suggests that audience patience for these rapid-fire remakes is wearing incredibly thin. If a massive, beloved property like Moana struggles to find its footing critically, it absolutely forces studio executives to seriously reevaluate their entire upcoming release calendar.
So, that brings us to our final provocative thought for this explainer. Between the 36% approval rating, the totally divided reception to its megastar lead, and the aesthetic clash of those CGI oceans, Moana really represents a critical turning point. We have to ask ourselves, after seeing the data, is this the film that finally forces a shift away from the live-action remake era? It's a massive question, and one that will undoubtedly shape the entertainment landscape and Disney's bottom line for years to come. What do you think? Drop your thoughts below, and we'll see you in the next explainer.